I suppose by now you may have noticed that American corporations are acting in a very bizarre way, a way that doesn't really make sense, and it doesn't seem like it gives them profits. For example, corporations are more likely to weigh in on political issues. I mean, here's an ice cream company that's screaming at you about how utter shit your American justice system is. And while that may be the case, why is an ice cream company screaming this at you? You may notice that corporations that are supposed to be competing with each other in unison have the same political opinions. Whether it is them supporting Black Lives Matter, whether it is them supporting LGBT issues, whether it is Stop Asian Hate. All of these things do not seem to be applied internationally, and as such, it seems that it's just corporate pandering. They are doing this like a facade. And the question is, why are they doing this? Why are they turning against their own customers? Why is Gillette starting to lecture men about rape culture when men are the people that buy their products? So why is Gillette stereotyping, stigmatizing? Why are they doing this? Why is the entertainment industry sharing block lists when it comes to their customers? Why are game developers refusing to listen to their own clients? Why do these businesses keep calling their customers sexist, misogynistic, racist? How do they keep getting away with it? Why aren't they bankrupt yet? And 4chan, as usual, comes up with an answer. And as you probably guessed it, these corporations aren't acting independently and reaching similar conclusions. They have a financial interest to act in the way that they do. Now, the story is a lot more complicated than this post, but I think it's at least the very basic, and people can at least understand what's happening in order to figure out why all of these corporations seemingly act against their own interests. So this man is in charge of one of the largest hedge funds in existence, which is called BlackRock. And hedge funds, which at the time had $7 trillion. By the way, when you talk about trillions, that's actually a lot of money, even when you talk about governments and banks. Now, with their money and influence, BlackRock managed to help stop the 2007 and 2008 housing bubble crash by creating what is called the maiden lane vehicles, which are all of the defunct Wall Street giant assets, and they were placed and managed directly by the Fed. So by doing this, BlackRock, as well as Larry Fink, managed to obtain a lot of power and influence within the financial system. Now, as you can imagine, most people didn't really appreciate this because they don't like when other people live by different rules than they do. In other words, if you start a business and you have bad business practices and you go bankrupt, no one cares about you. You're bankrupt, you still have to pay your loans, you still have to manage to figure out your way out of this mess. But if you're a wealthy hedge fund or a bank which does bad business practices and gives loans to people who can't repay them, and you go bankrupt, well, it's okay because you have a reset button. The government is going to bail you out. Politicians are going to try to figure out solutions for you. And because of that, it's not fair. Right-wingers didn't like it because it's not capitalism. It's not a free market. It's too much government intervention. Left-wing people didn't like it because the government is helping the 1%. They're helping the rich get more richer. As such, it's not equitable. So what ends up happening is the Occupy Wall Street movement appears, and this unites people from all over the political spectrum. Both left-leaning and right-wing people are united, and they are starting to do one of the most massive protests in our time. And of course, nothing terrifies the powers that be more than left-wingers and right-wingers joining forces together for mutual economical interests. Now, what ended the Wall Street movement was an infestation by woke people. You now have woke activists going within the Wall Street movement and trying to separate people into different factions by saying stuff like, only people of color get to speak first. No. Only people of color with disability get to speak first. No. Only people of color with disability that have a gay orientation get to speak first. And here you have an example of how it felt to be on the ground during that time. As someone who participated in Occupy Wall Street, I can confirm that this is one of the reasons why the protest failed, if not the main reason. I can't begin to tell you how many meetings were derailed by women and minorities obsessed with identity politics. Time and again, white guys would provide plans for organization, suggest strategies, and begin outlining steps to the realization of a goal that the group agreed upon. Their plans were all met. And here you have an example of how it felt to be on the ground during that time. As someone who participated in Occupy Wall Street, I can confirm that this is one of the reasons why the protest failed, if not the main reason. I can't begin to tell you how many meetings were derailed by women and minorities obsessed with identity politics. Time and again, white guys would provide plans for organization, suggest strategies, and begin outlining steps to the realization of a goal that the group agreed upon. Their plans were almost always met with objection from minority groups. A lot of the time, these people didn't even have specific points of concern. They just stood up and started complaining about lack of diversity, the victimization of their specific identity group, etc. Always, always, always reminding people and everyone how victimized they were. And what happened? Well, smart, able, organized white guys left the protest. They threw up their hands and walked away. I was one of these people. It did more to change my political views than any book or screed or barroom conversation. I'm still a far leftist, but I despise identity politics more than anything. I'm convinced it's the reason why the left is so absolutely fucked and useless today. Because a house divided cannot stand. And it turned the movement unpalatable for most people. And that's how it ended. And this is where you notice that the powers that be realize just how effective this tactic is into creating a house divided, which cannot stand by itself, that in a lot of articles, topics such as race or topics such as sexism or misogynism happen to appear in record numbers exactly when the Occupy Wall Street movement have ended. In other words, what the rich realized is that they can distract the people with social issues and not look at the economic issues. In fact, you can notice this even today if you read the mainstream media, how little importance is being given to things like inflation or the rising gas prices. These are things that are mentioned in transitory, and it's almost as if the reporters are bored about talking on them. And this is done on purpose. People are supposed to not focus on the economic issues. They're not supposed to focus on what the 1% are doing. They're supposed to focus on social issues. So what does this have to do with woke? Well, apparently the 1% realized just how powerful the woke ideology is on serving them and distracting people and turning citizens one against each other, that they decided to fund it. And as such, BlackRock and many other hedge funds have created what is called an ESG score. You probably have heard about it being discussed at the World Economic Forum, and it's also something that Klaus Schwab calls stakeholder capitalism. You see, shareholder capitalism is where a company is expected to make a profit. Stakeholder capitalism is now where a company is expected to care about the community. And this is why you have an ice cream company screaming how shit your country is. This is why Gillette is suggesting that your father, your brother, or your son may be a potential rapist in their advertisements. And this is why none of these companies care about what's going on in the Middle East or what's going on in China, because they're not doing this out of a personal conviction. They're doing this to raise their ESG score. Well, E stands for environmentalism. And here is where a company has to make a pledge that they're going to do zero emissions by a future date. And it doesn't mean that they actually have to do it, but if they manage to take pictures with the likes of Greta Thunberg, or if they manage to have someone come over to their headquarters and give a speech about the importance of preserving the climate, or they're doing some pretend way that they actually care about the environment, well, that gives them a high score. And it's kind of funny because you get companies like Tesla having lower ESG scores than other companies that have factories in China and pollute far more. Why? Because they don't do the whole activism shtick. They don't get Greta Thunberg to come into their headquarters and give a speech. They're not actively championing and putting logos about how green they are, even though they're making electric cars, which, according, if you ask random left-leaning people, they will say, well, this is the way of the future, even though they actually don't take into account just how damaging to the environment is the production of the car battery or the labor involved. But that's a story for another time. The second one is social. And the most interesting way that I saw how social is being described is Catholic values. And it's kind of interesting how a lot of the Catholic values actually do overlap with the woke values. So, for example, no sex. This is why you have a lot of sex negativity. Why the F1 Grand Prix girls got fired. Why Playboy decided to remove the risque ladies from their magazine. No guns. This is why many banks refuse to even do business with gun owners or gun stores. Now, of course, social is actually for every single woke issue you can possibly imagine. So if a company is advocating for open borders, if a company is supporting a progressive person and donating money to their campaign, all of these things are raising their social score. It's probably one of the reasons why Chick-fil-A eventually also backtracked and also started becoming woke, because it's in their own interest in making money. And finally, you have governance. Now, governance has to do with the corporation itself. So, for example, if the CEO wants to take a pay cut, if you hire diversity officers, and by the way, diversity officers know how useful they are, not to create diversity in a company, but to raise the ESG score, which is why they are also asking for ridiculous amount of cash. Because they get it, and the company understands it, and it's profitable for them. It's like, okay, we're going to hire this highly paid HR lady or diversity officer. We're going to pay them a lot of money, but we're going to make more money when we have the hedge funds like BlackRock investing into our business. And you can notice what happened with DC Comics. Like, DC Comics had a lot of their main talent being let go in order to make room for more diverse faces. And when you look at the people they hired, it was people that never worked in the comic book industry ever before. But that doesn't matter, because they weren't trying to sell comics. They were trying to get more money from places like BlackRock. So this is what ESG stands for. In other words, the philosophy that BlackRock is doing is to reward companies that follow certain rules with investment dollars. These rules could be the CEO not taking a salary, as we discussed previously, to how much diversity and inclusion there is. And from there, you get to see how the BlackRock is throwing around their 12 trillions to the companies with the highest ESG score, which, as we mentioned before, is an actual proxy woke score. Now you're thinking, so what company can get investment dollars from elsewhere that doesn't care? And apparently you don't understand just how centralized the system has become, to the point where BlackRock's Aladdin service is used by practically every major investment institution and fund. Most of these institutions and funds use the ESG ranking, as well as, even if they do not believe in it, as why would they want to draw the ire of the fourth branch of government if you do not? And by the way, BlackRock was called the fourth branch of government by Bloomberg magazine because of how tightly connected they are with the Fed. This has led to every single corporation having to increase their wokeness to get investment dollars. Otherwise, their ESG score will be low, and they will be effectively blocked out from the market. And this is why companies go woke and do not go broke. Because what ends up happening is your grandmother, throughout her entire life, placed her savings in various hedge funds so she can have a pension. The hedge funds owners created this system with the ESG because they realized wokeness is distracting people from the actual economic system, from the evil that they are doing and the policies that are actually toxic for the common citizen. For example, did you know that during the last lockdowns in the United States, especially when the CDC came up with the moratorium saying that if you have someone living in your apartment, so if you have a tenant, you are not allowed to kick them out because there's a pandemic. However, the banks could kick you out if you didn't pay your mortgage on time. So there was no pandemic for the banks, but there was pandemic for the citizens. And what ends up happening is BlackRock now starts systematically purchasing property and starts amassing a huge number of property, as long as with other hedge funds, which only happened because the government did a lockdown. So these are the things they're doing, and you're not supposed to notice them because you're more concentrated with wokeness. You're more concentrated in having to create a forced divide between left-winger and right-winger, so that left-leaning people and right-wing people never join together and actually start protesting against Wall Street as they used to. So to recap, your grandmother had her investments into hedge funds, the hedge funds gave that money to corporations that are woke, which is why corporations do not view you as the customer anymore. They view you as an entitled brat who do not appreciate the woke products that they are putting out. Because of that, they can block you, they can ridicule you, they can do all the things we talked about in the beginning, they can scream at you, they can humiliate you with commercials, because at the end of the day, there's not much you can do about it. You're already paying for them when you're investing your money into a savings account. Let me know what you guys think, and I'll see you in the comment section. Please share this video around if you like it. And as always, if you want to support the channel, there's a link into the pinned comment. And hopefully I will see you guys in my live stream. Take care.